Were there to be large-scale panicked flight away from the dollar, these countries are too small for their currencies to fill the dollar's shoes. And what you would have then would be a global liquidity crunch, an absence of international liquidity sufficient to finance cross-border trade and payments as we've become accustomed to, insufficient to finance 21st century globalization. So that would not only be a monetary and financial crunch, that would be a true global economic crunch. And clearly we have to hope that we don't go there.
Hey everyone, my name is Anthony Fatsis and welcome to another episode of the WTFinance podcast. On this episode, I had the pleasure of welcoming on Barry Eichengreen. So Barry is a renowned economist and professor of economics and political science at the University of California, Berkeley, where he has taught since 1987. He's also the author of many books, including the upcoming book, Money Beyond Borders, Global Currencies from Croesus to Crypto. So Barry, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you for the plug and the invite.
No problem at all. Looking forward to speaking. And as I was saying before, seems like the world, lots been happening in the economy and globally. So I'd really be interested in maybe your broad overview of what you're currently seeing overall.
So you start with big questions, my friend. I am seeing an economy that is continuing to putter along, but I think is increasingly troubled. The K-shaped economy is definitely a thing, with some investors and sectors doing well in the United States and globally, but others not so much. And I think there is high uncertainty about the payoff that those investors are betting on, whether all this investment in data centers and chips will really pay off, whether the fruits of the AI revolution will accrue to the builders of those data centers and large language models or not. So that's a starting point, I think, for our conversation.
Yeah, interesting. And do you see this K-shaped economy as just a new normal? Because it seems that, post-COVID it accelerated, and I imagine with AI as well, it's going to continue to accelerate. So do you see this as the base point and it's just going to continue to accelerate? Do you see there being a pathway back to where we were pre-COVID, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that if AI is really going to hollow out white-collar jobs and so forth, it will be a long road back. I think given the political obstacles that we in the United States and other countries have thrown up for themselves, reaching a political consensus about how to bridge that gap between rich and poor and put everyone in a position where they can take advantage of new opportunities and these new technologies. That will be a hard problem to solve. So I like to think of myself, despite the fact that I'm an economist, as being an optimist. And I would like to think that we will get through this difficult economic moment and this difficult political moment as well. I just can't tell you when. That's the first rule of forecasting, right? Give them a forecast or give them a date, never both.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. And you mentioned this difficult, political sphere and, geopolitical sphere. So how are you currently seeing it? Is it just the US shift and how that's impacting the world? Or do you see it as a bigger secular shift that's sort of we've been experiencing, I guess you could say, the past 5 years, or maybe since the Russian invasion? How do you see it?
Yeah, I think the current political moment is dominated by Mr. Trump and by Mr. Putin, in both cases not in a good way. That Trump has gifted Europe with a necessity and an opportunity to de-risk from reliance on the United States. But I think Europeans are realizing that effectively de-risking from reliance on the United States geopolitically, militarily, economically, will take many years building up that defense, foreign policy, military capacity, for example. That's not something that can be done in a day or a year or maybe even a decade. diversifying one's trade away from the United States because the U.S. has moved in a more protectionist and less predictable direction is difficult as well. So we are seeing one European leader after another fly off to China. We are seeing Mark Carney of Canada reaching out to China for closer economic relations, despite the diplomatic problems that China and Canada had in the past. So I think that the damage that has been done to America's reputation as a reliable economic and alliance partner cannot be undone anytime soon. And there's no sign, recent negotiations in Geneva notwithstanding, that Putin is prepared to rethink his strategy of retaining power at home by fomenting a foreign war. Standard tactic for a strongman, and Putin needs that tactic, I think, at the moment more than ever.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. So do you see Europe sort of becoming its own? I guess the three powers. You could say U.S., China, Europe potentially, or the BRICS as China. Can you see them evolving, or I struggle to see that because of many of their economic policies, which have sort of stunted growth over the past 10 years?
Well, I think Europe is taking baby steps in the right direction. They are being hit hard now. They will be hit hard now by China shock 2.0. Now that China has moved into Germany's wheelhouse by producing EVs better and cheaper than Germany can produce, and similarly moved into competition with various European countries in clean tech, in solar panels and batteries and so forth. That's a steep hill for the Europeans to climb. I think they know what they need to do in terms of encouraging startups, in terms of completing capital market union, in terms of greater labor market flexibility, where the U.S., in my view, is moving in the wrong direction in terms of economic policy. I think the Europeans are taking baby steps in the right direction, but I do worry that there remains the problem, Henry Kissinger's problem: when you want to call Europe, you don't know who to call. That there isn't the political solidarity and political unity needed to complete that economic task, and to build on top of it the defense capability and common foreign policy that a true world power needs.
Yeah, okay. So continuing, as you said, sort of internal rifts, I imagine, and then unfortunately, it seems like the more integration there is, the more rifts there are because there's many competing interests.
Yeah, Europe is a continent of competing interests, no doubt. And the United States, on the one hand, is making it easier for Europe by pointing up the urgency of the task and the importance of unity. And on the other hand, making it more difficult for Europe when we send our Secretary of State to Budapest on the eve of a contested election and endorse the incumbent. I don't think that makes things any easier for Brussels or the other European capitals.
Yeah, and I guess on the other side there was the Romanian cancelled election. So it does seem that there's shifts in every direction, and yeah, who knows where it will go or what will happen. Yeah,
Indeed.
yeah. But then if we look at, I guess the US as the hegemon, as the global currency, as all these factors, you mentioned that it's going to be unlikely that the US can pull away from China. I'm guessing it's also the same. There's unlikely that the rest of the world can pull away from the US from that perspective, from the US dollar, from its massive consumption economy. Do you see that continuing to be a challenge, and the US continuing to have the central reserve currency?
I think that other countries and economies, be they Canada or the European Union or China are trying to diversify away from the United States and reliance on US technologies, be they monetary and financial technologies like the dollar, or communications or office technologies like Microsoft Office. The European Commission has famously announced that it doesn't know whether it can trust its ongoing access to Microsoft Office, so it's going to look for a native alternative in Europe. But the point is that they're trying to de-risk and diversify away from the US as quickly as they can, but that's not very quickly in practice. For defense, they continue to rely on capabilities that the US possesses, but Europe itself does not. In Ukraine, they continue to rely on Starlink. And as for the dollar, there simply is no alternative at the moment to relying on the greenback as the leading global currency. So Madame Lagarde talks about how policy uncertainty and chaos emanating from the United States creates an opening for the euro. I think it creates an opening, but walking through that door will take time. The euro has gained zero ground as a global currency, as a true international currency. In its 25 years of existence, there have to be more euro bonds, more euro union common bonds. There has to be capital markets union. There are a bunch of other prerequisites that European nations have to agree to put in place that they have not succeeded in putting in place for over the last 25 years. I think the Chinese are continuing with their efforts to increase the global footprint of their currency, the renminbi. But if you look at the data, renminbi internationalization has kind of stalled out. The currency is used to invoice and settle China's own trade. It's hardly used anywhere else. It's a second or third tier currency on global foreign exchange markets. It accounts for like 4% of trade settlements messaged through SWIFT, where the dollar accounts for almost half. So pulling away from the dollar is easier said than done, but there are a lot of people who are saying that it should be done.
Yeah, but I imagine it would be, if the US isn't a trusted partner, can China be a trusted partner?
Yeah, so when I go to China, I went a couple of times last year. I give a topic, a speech or two on the global role of the dollar and the potential role of the Chinese renminbi, and I observe that every leading international and reserve currency in history, in modern history, certainly, has been the currency of a political democracy or republic where there are checks and balances on the arbitrary exercise of power by the executive, where the king or the president or the Politburo can't wake up one morning and arbitrarily change the rules of the monetary game. So my subtext there has always been China will have to create an independent central bank and move to a system where there are checks on arbitrary action by the president and the executive before people are comfortable, before central banks are comfortable about parking their reserve balances in Shanghai. Now, of course, there is a second subtext if we begin to worry about checks and balances in the United States and rule of law in the United States. Will that accelerate movement away from the dollar? We haven't seen much evidence of acceleration so far. The analogy I use is with a melting glacier, that we've had glacial movement away from the dollar over the last couple of decades, but we know that a glacier can crack and fall into the sea, and I worry that recent disputes between the US and other countries could accelerate that formerly glacial melting.
Yeah, interesting. I guess compared to other fiat currencies, it hasn't moved. But if you look at maybe precious metals like gold and silver, I'm not sure if you are seeing connections in what's happening there with maybe some of these countries moving away from holding U.S. treasuries and other debt, or do you think it's more speculation? How are you sort of analyzing that move?
No, I think there has been a desire on the part of central banks to uh, diversify away from dollar-heavy portfolios, and gold is one place they can go. They have not traditionally held um, much in the way of gold reserves. So, the numbers that we read about how many billions or trillions of dollars of gold central banks have been acquiring. If you're talking about advanced country central banks, all that's happened is the price of their inherited gold reserves has gone up. If you're talking about central banks, they have been actively buying gold, some on the books, others like China, hidden purchases. And part of that is that they're looking around for other forms in which to hold reserves. An advantage of gold is that you can put it on a plane or a ship, bring it back home, vault it at home where it's safe from being frozen in the manner that the Bank of Russia's foreign reserves were frozen in 2022. I was amused the other day to read that the state government of Wyoming has been buying gold for its natural resource reserve fund. So it's not only foreign governments and central banks, it's US states who are worried about whether the dollar will retain its value and whether its stewards, the up until now politically independent Federal Reserve, will retain that independence and will retain the ability to be reliable stewards of their reserve holdings.
Yeah, will be really interesting to see. So, do you have any ideas of potential reserve currencies or potential, I guess, advancements in currencies that you've been doing research on or that you've sort of included in the book?
Well, so I think what we have begun to see is the rise of non-traditional international and reserve currencies. The currencies that used to be expensive and awkward to buy and sell, you can now buy and sell at low cost on your cell phone. And corporate and central bank reserve managers can go into the Forex market and buy them at much lower bid-ask spreads than previously. So we're talking about the currencies of small, open, well-managed, generally inflation targeting economies. The Canadian dollar, the Australian dollar, the New Zealand dollar, the Singapore dollar. Why they all have that name, I'm not so sure. We're talking about the South Korean won, about the Scandinavian, the three kronas of Scandinavia. So the dollar has lost about 10 percentage points in its share of global foreign exchange reserves over the last couple of decades. That share is down from a little more than 70% to a little less than 60%. And most of the market share that the dollar has lost has been gained not by the euro, not by the Chinese renminbi, but by these smaller, well-managed, reliable currencies. And I would expect that trend to continue because digital technology makes it easier to use and transact in those currencies. So if the dollar continues to lose global market share very gradually, that gradual loss can be replaced by these other currencies. Were there to be large-scale panicked flight away from the dollar, these countries are too small for their currencies to fill the dollar's shoes. And what you would have then would be a global liquidity crunch, an absence of international liquidity sufficient to finance cross-border trade and payments as we've become accustomed to, insufficient to finance 21st century globalization. So that would not only be a monetary and financial crunch, that would be a true global economic crunch. And clearly we have to hope that we don't go there.
Yeah, interesting. And could that sort of reduction in percentage be more for the US dollar devaluing? And I guess maybe that's a reason there's devalue because people have been selling it. But
Well,
if I look at it, yeah, sorry.
so in the last year, the dollar has fallen on a broad trade weighted basis by a bit uh, less than 10%. It stabilized in the last part of last year, and now it's begun falling again. But what I've described to you about how the dollar's global dominance has eroded gradually, especially on the reserve front over the last couple of decades, you see that at constant exchange rates, taking out changes in the value of the dollar against other currencies, and not only at current exchange rates. So I think there is an issue. The Trump administration has this on again, off again attitude toward dollar depreciation. Sometimes it's welcomed and should even be encouraged because of the belief in certain parts of the administration that a weaker dollar will make US exports and manufacturing more competitive internationally. And at other times, everyone from President Trump himself on down says we value the dollar's global role and we will punish foreign countries who try to move away from it and create alternatives. But when this on again, off again view is on, when we hear rhetoric about how a weaker dollar is probably a good thing for the United States on balance, that encourages foreign corporates, banks, and governments to look around for alternatives.
Yeah, interesting. So it sounds like a bifurcating world, a sort of multipolar world, similar to what we're seeing geopolitically. That's sort of what it sounds like would be the most likely outcome in the future.
Yeah, I think we can move toward a more decentralized global monetary and financial system because we have digital technologies that support decentralization. Once upon a time, it was very costly and awkward to use a different currency than all your customers and suppliers were using in different countries. Now it's much easier to go to the Forex market and buy, hold, use different currencies, hedge those exposures with derivatives and so forth. I've long been of the view that moving toward this more multipolar system was probably a good thing, just like the global commons benefit from biodiversity. The global monetary system benefits from monetary diversity, where there are multiple sources of global liquidity. So if one, say the United States, falls down on the job, we can turn to the European Central Bank or someone for the necessary liquidity. So last weekend, the ECB announced that it was extending euro liquidity lines, repo liquidity lines, to almost every central bank around the world, a new innovation on its part. And I think that's an example of that beneficial diversity. If this diversification occurs gradually and smoothly over time, that will be a good thing for the planet and its monetary system. If it occurs chaotically in a crash, that'll be a bad thing.
Yeah, and it'll all depend on liquidity. And I think it's almost the US is struggling with that as well. It's you need to provide so much liquidity globally so that the system keeps turning, and especially as it grows, it's greater amounts of liquidity. So I think that's going to be the challenge.
Indeed.
Okay, great. So yeah, we mentioned your book at the start, so Money Beyond Borders. What was the influence for you to sort of write the book?
Well, I was concerned really with struck by two developments. One was all this chatter around the future of the dollar. So I wanted to understand what the longer history of international currencies told us about the advantages and disadvantages being able to mint a global currency, and what the longer history told us about the rise and fall, the factors behind the rise and fall of such currencies. So in the book, I not only look at the dollar and the pound sterling before the dollar and the Dutch guilder before the pound sterling, but I go all the way back to ancient Rome and Greece. I look at the Byzantine solidus. There are, in fact, a long list of currencies that were used in trade and sometimes for financial transactions around the world. And I think I wanted to learn from that history about the role of economic rise and fall, financial development, geopolitics, once again, in the dynamics of international currency status. And the second factor that prompted me to write the book was digital innovation, what we were talking about before, cryptocurrencies, stablecoins, central bank digital currencies, tokenized bank deposits, internationally linked fast payment systems. All of these new developments promise to transform the international monetary landscape. We don't know yet whether that transformation will advantage or disadvantage the dollar. But again, financial innovation has occurred throughout history, starting with the Lydians' invention of coinage in the 7th century BC. So that's the subtitle of the book, From Croesus to Crypto, from the Lydian king who invented coins all the way up to cryptocurrencies. I wanted to see the role of, understand better the role of financial innovation, technical change in the monetary and financial sphere for global currencies, again, with an eye toward what is coming.
Okay, and in that sort of investigation, was there anything that really stuck out to you or that surprised you?
That really surprised me, the important role of geopolitics and alliance politics throughout history, how um, central banks, governments, firms, countries tend to hold and use the currencies of their alliance partners. You can see that in the way in the 1960s, the West Germans and the Japanese held and supported the value of the dollar when that was threatened in the late days of the Bretton Woods system. You can see that now in how South Korea and Japan hold more dollars as reserves than their trade and financial links with the United States, and typical behavior globally would lead one to expect, because those countries rely on the US for their nuclear umbrella, for their defense. So I didn't expect to see such a prominent role for geopolitics in international currency status, but you see that right down through history.
Yeah, but it looks like it's going to continue to play a big role in the future as well.
And we see it now.
Yeah, precisely. All right. So Barry, thanks so much for your time today. We sort of covered quite a lot in a short period. But my last question is, what is one message you want people to take away from the conversation?
Well, that being able to mint an international currency has considerable advantages for the issuer. This is not something that should be taken for granted. That ability has to be carefully nurtured and maintained, and it should not be squandered. So maybe that's 3 concluding thoughts rather than 1.
Great. Thank you so much. And Barry, thanks so much for coming on again. If anyone wanted to find out more about your work and what you do, where would the best place for that be?
Well, best place would be to take a look at the Princeton University Press website, or your favorite online bookseller for Money Beyond Borders.
Yeah, perfect. I'll put a link below if anyone wants to look further into it and buy it. But thanks again for coming on.
Anthony, thank you.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate the support. If you've got value out of this, I'd really appreciate it if you could like, subscribe, or comment, good or bad feedback. I'm always open to that, but it really helps with the channel. As I said before, only about 14% of people actually subscribe to this channel. So if you were to that, it would really help. It could mean we could continue to grow. If not, thanks for watching, and see you on the next show. And you also might like this video right here. All right. Thanks again.